The hallway went silent the moment he said it. "Hey, you," the white Navy SEAL muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's your rank, sweetheart?" His teammates burst out laughing, boots stomping against the polished floor like a drumline of arrogance. And the black woman he was mocking? She didn't even blink. He leaned closer, eyes full of contempt. "Come on, you can tell me. Kitchen staff? Laundry? Or did you wander in here by mistake?" She stood perfectly still, shoulders straight, gaze calm, like his words bounced off her instead of cutting through the room. Soldiers passing by slowed down just to watch the humiliation unfold, whispering, smirking, acting like the scene was entertainment instead of cruelty. The SEAL grinned. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or do you not know how rank works?" If this already made your blood boil, hit like and subscribe right now, because stories like this are still happening, and the world needs to hear them. The SEAL's name was Chad, the kind of guy whose ego walked 3 steps ahead of him. He lifted his chin and waved his hand in her face like she was invisible. "Seriously, what are you doing in our hallway? This is SEAL territory. People like you stay in the support rooms." His team howled again, but the woman, Imani, dressed in a simple base-issued uniform, brown skin glowing under harsh fluorescent lights, did something none of them expected. She took a long breath, for seconds in, for seconds hold, for seconds out, for seconds hold. A breathing pattern only someone with years of elite training would recognize. But none of the men watching were smart enough to notice. Chad circled her, like a predator testing prey. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Imani finally turned her head, slow, deliberate, and her eyes met his with a calmness that didn't fit the moment at all. That calmness made Chad hesitate. He didn't show it, but something deep inside him twitched, a tiny instinct whispering, "You're making a mistake." But arrogance is louder than instinct. "Rule number 1, he said, tapping her shoulder with 2 fingers. "Visitors follow orders." "Rule number 2, he leaned closer, voice dripping with mockery. "You salute us, not the other way around." Imani said nothing. She didn't defend herself. She didn't correct him. She didn't even move. And that stillness, controlled, intentional, made the hallway feel tighter, heavier, like the air itself knew something none of the SEALs did. Because the woman they were humiliating, she wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. And she definitely wasn't someone they should have touched. Not today. Not ever. The cafeteria always sounded the same at noon. Chatter, trays clattering, boots scraping tile. But the moment Imani stepped inside, the noise shifted. Not quieter, just sharper. Like the entire room tilted to watch the show, they expected Chad to put on again. He didn't disappoint. Chad was already seated with 6 SEAL teammates, all muscles and smug smiles, loudly retelling the hallway incident, like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened on base. "There she is," he announced, slamming his tray on the table so hard a fork bounced off. "Our guest of honor, the lost soldier." Laughter erupted. Imani walked past them silently, carrying only a plain meal tray. Her steps were steady, not rushed, not shaken, just steady. That bothered Chad more than any comeback could have. He pushed his chair back and followed her to the far corner, making sure the whole cafeteria had eyes on them. "Imani, right? Tell me something." She didn't look up. She sliced her fruit with the calm precision of someone carving out her next breath. Chad scoffed. "Wow, she still won't talk. Maybe she doesn't understand English." One of the SEALs chimed in, "Maybe she thought this was a dining hall for real soldiers." More laughter, but a few tables away, soldiers who weren't part of Chad's circle quietly watched. Their eyes didn't hold amusement. They held discomfort. Some even held guilt, because everyone knew the truth. Chad picked targets who couldn't fight back. At least, he thought they couldn't. Imani lifted her gaze just once. Not at Chad, not at the room, at a clock above the exit. A quick glance, then back to her food. Calculating something, measuring something. Chad mistook that silence for fear. He moved closer. Let's see how much she knows. "Hey, sweetheart, what's the procedure for gear inspection? Come on." Humor me. A few soldiers stiffened. They expected a wrong answer, a stutter, a moment of embarrassment. Imani answered in a level tone, without pausing her meal. Section 6B. Full equipment layout, categorized by function, checked in sequence. Safety gear, communications, weapons, backup supplies. Her voice was calm. Her words were exact. Her tone was unmistakably trained. Chad blinked, then forced a laugh, hiding the flicker of unease in his eyes. Wow. Someone memorized a manual. Cute. Imani didn't respond. But something shifted in the room. The laughter felt forced. The tension felt heavier. And for the first time, the humiliation didn't land the way Chad wanted. Still, he repeated the cycle at every opportunity. Hallway, PT field, briefing room. Akumoil. A jab there, always loud enough for an audience. But Imani, she documented everything silently. Faces, voices, reactions. No anger, no tears, just quiet calculation. The kind of quiet that doesn't mean weakness. The kind that means storm coming. Friday lunch rush turned the cafeteria into a wall of noise. Boots, chatter, trays, chairs. But all that noise died the moment Chad decided today was a day he'd go further than usual. Imani had just sat down with her tray when Chad appeared behind her, wearing the kind of grin men get when they think they own the world. Careful, everyone, he announced loudly. She might confuse the salt with, I don't know, classified documents. His team laughed so hard a soldier at the next table flinched. Imani didn't react, not even a blink. That irritated Chad. He grabbed a cup of orange juice from his tray, pretended to lose his balance, and poured it down her sleeve, fingers theatrically slipping. Oh no, he gasped with fake concern. Look at that. Guess we should have given you a bib. Laughter exploded. Imani froze for half a second, not from fear, but from something sharper, colder, calculated. And that tiny pause created the moment. Emotional mystery hook. Inserted here, she didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look angry. Instead, she slowly wiped her sleeve, lifted her eyes, and stared directly at Chad with calmness, so controlled it felt like she was memorizing him. Not afraid, not hurt, just waiting, like she already knew something he didn't. If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you stand for fairness, hit subscribe. Chad's smirk faltered, just for a second. He covered it with another joke. Relax, sweetheart. It's just juice. Not like you're trained for anything serious. But when she finally spoke, the cafeteria went silent. Her voice was level, smooth, almost emotionless. Chad, you should really be more aware of your surroundings. He scoffed. Why? Afraid someone important might be watching? Imani didn't answer. She simply turned back to her food with the same unsettling calm. That calmness made Chad's neck prick. The same calmness she had in the hallway. The same calmness during every insult. The same calmness he couldn't shake from his head. His team leaned in. Dude, she's weird. She doesn't react. She's giving me the creeps. Chad waved them off, forcing confidence back into his voice. She's nobody, just stubborn. But deep down, behind all the arrogance, something else crept in. Doubt. Thin, cold, unavoidable doubt. And it only got worse later that afternoon, when he tested her again during a training demonstration. Let's see what Little Miss Mystery knows, he announced, pointing to advanced communications tech. Set this to a secure tactical frequency. No instructions. Soldiers whispered. Even officers turned their heads. Imani stepped forward calmly, touched a few buttons, rerouted encryption, and established a secure channel in under 30 seconds. No hesitation, no fumbling, no confusion. Chad froze. So did half the room. Because that wasn't beginner's luck. That wasn't memorization. That was experience. Real experience. The kind she shouldn't have if she were who Chad thought she was. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and fresh sweat. Standard for a Friday afternoon on base. Soldiers filled the seats in uneven rows, flipping pages, tapping pens, whispering about weekend plans. But when Imani walked in, the whispers shifted again, not mocking this time, not amused, curious, because after that flawless comms demonstration, people weren't laughing the way they used to. Chad sat in the front row pretending to stretch, but his eyes followed her like he was tracking a target. He couldn't shake the memory of her fingers moving across the equipment. Steady, confident, expert. He'd seen elite operators struggle with that setup. She made it look like a morning warm-up drill. Still, he forced a smirk. "Look who thinks she belongs here," he muttered to his teammate, loud enough for her to hear. Imani ignored him completely. The commanding officer droned through protocol reminders, updates, assignments, but the room's attention kept drifting back to the woman sitting perfectly straight, jotting careful notes, watching everything. Then Chad made his move. He raised his hand. "Sir, permission to test our visitor's knowledge?" A few soldiers stiffened. The officer sighed. "Make it brief, Lieutenant." Chad turned toward her, lips curling. "All right, tell us, what's the procedure when entering a combat zone with low visibility? Since you seem to know everything." Everyone waited for a pause, a stumble, a crack. Instead, Imani answered with surgical precision. Terrain evaluation, silent entry formation, threat mapping, fallback positions, communication codes. Each step delivered with the confidence of someone who hadn't learned the rules, but written them. A murmur rippled across the room. One officer raised an eyebrow. Another exchanged a look with the sergeant across from him. And for the first time, Chad didn't laugh. He swallowed hard, then pushed further. "Fine. Lucky guess. What about rapid response coordination? Priority chain, go." Imani didn't even look up from her notes. Primary lead establishes directive engagement. Secondary executes tactical flow. Third confirms intel integrity. All units maintain encrypted signal discipline. Chain concludes on field command unless override from upper classified authority is issued. Silence. Real silence. The kind that feels like pressure on the chest. Chad felt a bead of sweat slide down his neck. He forced a laugh, but it cracked halfway out. "That's impressive," one of the officers said quietly. Imani finally lifted her eyes. Not at Chad, at the senior officers, measuring their reactions, letting them see she wasn't flustered. Then she asked a question of her own. A simple one, a deadly one. "Lieutenant," she said evenly, "in your experience, what's the protocol when a senior officer reveals themselves after a period of covert observation?" Chad blinked. "What?" The officers in the room went still. Chad tried to laugh it off. "That depends on who they are." "Why? You planning to surprise us?" But something had shifted, in the officer's eyes, in Chad's posture, in the air itself. Because now, for the first time, they weren't looking at Imani like she didn't belong. They were looking at her like they were trying to figure out exactly how high she ranked, and how badly they'd misjudged her. The sun was slipping behind the barracks when General Ashley Hayes appeared outside Imani's temporary quarters. Her uniform was crisp, her expression unreadable, calm, but carrying the weight of someone who had seen more than she'd ever admit. She knocked once. Imani opened the door instantly, as if she had been expecting this exact moment. "May I come in?" the general asked. Imani stepped aside, without a word. The room was small, standard housing, standard desk, standard bed, but the open laptop on the table was anything but standard. Its screen wasn't showing email schedules or base reports. It displayed encrypted files, biometric locks, restricted channels, systems General Hayes had only seen in the uppermost layers of military command. She closed the door behind her. "How long have you been observing him?" Hayes asked. 5 days, Imani replied. "And the others?" "Longer." Hayes inhaled slowly. "I thought so." The general studied her closely now. The posture, the restraint, the surgical calm. This wasn't the behavior of a junior officer. This wasn't even the behavior of a mid-rank operative. No, this was the composure of someone who lived and breathed classified operations. Someone whose records didn't show up in standard systems. Someone who existed on files with redacted pages and blacked out sections. Someone dangerous. Someone necessary. General Hayes stepped closer to the laptop, eyes narrowing at the classified seal glowing on the screen. "That clearance level," she whispered. "Only 3 people on this entire coast have it." Imani didn't answer. She just held the general's gaze, steady and unblinking. And in that quiet, unmistakable moment, Hayes understood. Imani wasn't here by mistake. She wasn't here as a visitor. She wasn't here to observe the base. She was here for him. If you believe talent can silence every insult, share this video. And to everyone watching from the US, UK, and Canada, your voice matters. Hayes sat down slowly. "You're undercover," she said. "But under whose orders?" Imani clicked a key. A secure document appeared, one that made the general sit up straighter. The Secretary of Defense's seal. A directive. A signature. "I'm investigating systemic abuse," Imani said. "Across bases. Across ranks. Across cultures." She turned the laptop toward Hayes. Audio files. Transcripts. Details of every insult Chad delivered. Names of every soldier who joined in. Times. Locations. Patterns. And a chain of messages Chad thought no one would ever see. Hayes exhaled. This will go straight to Washington." "It already has," Imani replied quietly. "Tomorrow's ceremony will be his final test." Hayes frowned. "You know he's planning something?" "Yes. He believes humiliating me in front of the mayor will put me in my place." A hint of a smile flickered at the corner of Imani's mouth. "But he has no idea what place I'm actually in." Hayes nodded slowly, a mix of respect and realization settling in. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we let the truth walk into that room." Imani closed the laptop, and the room felt heavy with the weight of what was coming next. The cafeteria was packed for the mayor's visit. Officers in polished uniforms, junior soldiers standing against the walls. Every table filled. The air buzzed with anticipation. Chad strutted through it like he owned the floor. Today was his big show. He spotted Imani sitting alone at a corner table, posture straight, hands folded, eyes calm. Perfect target. Chad approached the mayor with a booming laugh. "Sir, before we start, let me introduce you to someone who's been struggling to adjust." The mayor, polite but clearly uncomfortable, nodded. "And you are—" "Imani," she replied softly. Chad leaned in, loud enough for half the room to hear. "She claims she's here doing some kind of inspection." He scoffed. "Trust me, she doesn't know the first thing about military structure." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the tables. The mayor frowned. "And what exactly is your role here, miss?" Chad answered before she could speak. "Honestly, we still don't know. Maybe she got lost. Maybe she wandered in from civilian housing. Happens, you know." The room tensed. Imani lifted her eyes and spoke with steady precision. "My role here is very specific, Mayor Johnson." "Oh, really?" Chad snorted. "Enlighten us." But before she could, something shifted near the entrance. Boots. Heavy, deliberate boots. The kind that commanded attention without a word. General Hayes entered the cafeteria in full dress uniform. Her presence sliced through the noise. Conversations died. Chairs stilled. All eyes locked on her. She walked straight toward Imani's table. Past Chad, past the mayor, past the stunned soldiers, and stopped in front of a quiet black woman who had endured days of humiliation. Then something happened that froze the entire room. General Hayes raised her hand and delivered a full, formal, precise military salute. Not casual, not polite. A salute reserved for someone of equal or higher rank. "Colonel Imani Richardson," Hayes said clearly, her voice carrying through every inch of the cafeteria. "On behalf of this base, I apologize for the misconduct you faced during your covert evaluation." Gasps exploded across the room. People stood. Forks dropped. A few soldiers covered their mouths. Chad's entire body went rigid. "See, Colonel," he choked out. Imani rose slowly, returning the salute with flawless control. Then she faced Chad, her posture no longer quiet, no longer passive. authoritative, unshakable, commanding. "Lieutenant Chad Carter," she said, every word slicing clean, "you have spent the past week insulting a senior officer. You have violated military code sections on conduct, discrimination, power abuse, and coordinated harassment." The general stepped forward. "Present the evidence." Imani tapped her tablet. Chad's own voice boomed through the speakers. "Hey, sweetheart, what's your rank?" "Kitchen staff." "Let's teach her where she belongs." "The little black girl won't last a week." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Imani continued. 17 soldiers have provided statements. 6 hours of audio. 3 days of documentation. All verified. Chad's face drained of color. You can't. I didn't know who you were." Imani stepped closer, her voice quiet but lethal. "That is exactly the problem, Lieutenant. Respect isn't optional, and it isn't conditional." General Hayes nodded to the MPs waiting near the doors. "Lieutenant Carter," she said, "you are under arrest for insubordination, discrimination, and conduct unbecoming of a United States service member." Chad's knees buckled. The MPs grabbed his arms as the room watched in stunned silence. No laughter now, no confidence. Just a man realizing he destroyed his own career, one racist insult at a time. 6 months later, the cafeteria looked nothing like the place where humiliation once echoed. The walls held new posters on conduct, respect, equity. The air felt lighter. Conversations calmer. People laughed without fear of who might be listening. And walking through that same cafeteria, head held high, steps confident, was Colonel Imani Richardson. Not undercover, not silent, not observing, but leading. Soldiers moved aside respectfully as she passed, offering crisp nods. Some smiled with quiet gratitude. A few, especially the ones who had once looked away during Chad's taunts, stood a little straighter when she walked by, guilt replaced with determination to be better. Imani paused near the window, watching a group of new recruits practicing drill routines outside. Young faces, hopeful faces, faces of every color. A reminder of why she had accepted her new role. Her investigation hadn't just taken down one man. It had opened files across the region. 7 bases were now under review. 16 officers faced consequences ranging from suspension to discharge. 3 commanders had resigned, and Congress had passed a new directive, one designed to protect soldiers from exactly the kind of abuse Chad had used so casually. Some called it the Richardson Standard. Imani never asked for the name, but she upheld the responsibility. Behind her, General Hayes approached with a folder tucked under her arm. "Colonel," Hayes greeted with a small smile, "your new assignment reports." Imani turned. "More cases?" "Not cases," Hayes said. "Requests. Soldiers asking for training under your command. You become something of a symbol." Imani didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Symbols aren't the goal. Change is." Hayes nodded. "And yet you've managed both." They stepped aside as a young black soldier walked past. Barely 19, uniform still stiff from its first ironing. He hesitated, then turned back nervously. "Ma'am," he asked, "can I say something?" Imani nodded. I reported an incident last week," he said quietly. "I don't think I would have had the courage before. So, thank you for proving people like me deserve to be here." She met his eyes, the fear, the hope, the relief, and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You deserve to be here," she said. "Not because of me, because you earned it. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." The soldier nodded, chest lifting with pride, then hurried off. Imani watched him go, the corner of her mouth lifting in the faintest hint of a smile. Because this, not the undercover work, not the arrests, not the headlines, but this moment right here was the real victory. A future where dignity wasn't a privilege, where respect didn't depend on rank or skin color, where justice wasn't an afterthought. It was a standard. She took one last look around the cafeteria, letting the memory of what happened here settle into the quiet. Then she walked forward, not as someone who had survived humiliation, but as someone who had rewritten the rules so others never had to.